Welcome back to the Kicks and Picks podcast. The whole crew is here after a winning week of picks, 6-3-1 on the week last week, up 3.2 units. Solid week for us, gets us into the green for the season. Boy, does it feel good to finally be there. We are now 131, 122, and 12 with plus 1.85 units, and 2024 continues to treat us well. That's where we've seen our big improvement. 48, 30, and 7 plus 13.2 units. Guys, I guess I have to start. How does it feel to finally be up on the season? I know we had a rough stretch there. We were in the red for a while, and now we are trending in the right direction.
We're like the San Francisco Giants of betting. We're really good in even number years, apparently. Because I think we
I
crushed
like
it
it.
in 2022, and then we kind of drop off in the second half of the season once we got to 2023, and now we're back into an even number year with 2024.
Love
I
it.
think that's the analogy I'm going to pull.
Hell yeah. I mean, we've said it for the past couple of weeks, but like we had some disastrous weeks early in the year, and the fact that we've pulled out of it and that we have, almost 10 more winners than we have losers, it kind of felt like we might not get there, but it's been a complete turnaround. It shows that some of the bad luck is turning into good luck. We definitely had a little bit of that on our side last week, but it was overdue. So happy to do it. Let's try to do it all over again.
Yeah, there's always got to be some luck involved, right? Because we've had plenty of bets that have had bad luck where there's posts and other things, VARs, whatever. And then you got once in a while, you got to have things break your way, and things have been starting to break our way. The reads, I think, have been better than our numbers indicate for the most part. That's no excuse for the record, but I do think it doesn't always play out the way it should. And I think most bettors probably feel that way. But winning week. And let's jump into the Champions League first. Champions League round of 16 wrapped up today. I know that from a Serie A perspective, I didn't necessarily expect Lazio or Napoli to go through, but man, oh man, Nick, Inter, what a bottle job in the second half today, and just kind of threw away what was looking like a promising campaign for them in the Champions League to go along with Serie A. Maybe look for the double there.
Yeah. Really nothing good to say about them or about that game. I think if you told me before the game, and I think we all spoke about it, that they were going to go up a goal, be up 2-0 on aggregate, I'd say, see you later.
Yeah,
Right. It's not
yeah.
not the same Atletico. They don't really have that scoring punch. They've kind of faltered after making it through the group in La Liga, and Inter's been on cruise control. They've been dominating every single team that's been put in front of them. So to say that I saw this coming, can't say that I did. At Inter as one of my picks, had them draw no bet. I thought they'd get out of this with at least a draw. They got it wrong from the opening kick. I have to give Inzaghi some shit for it. I think he got outcoached, and that's, I mean, to say you got outcoached by Simeone, it's not necessarily a knock. The guy is tried and true. He's been in the Champions League. He's won league titles. Let's give Atletico a little bit of credit, but I think Inter maybe just overlooked them a little bit. Um, like I said, I think he got the game plan all wrong. I think he let Atletico get far too much of the ball, and I don't really know what he was thinking in terms of his substitutions or his strategy. Just it was kind of like a jigsaw puzzle that he could never get the pieces to fit. Everybody looked a little bit out of sorts, and I think what the other thing we've been saying that was going to come back to haunt them. Um, Lautaro and Thuram can't have an A+ game every single game, and certainly they picked the worst possible game for what I think was both of their worst games of the season. But who are they going to go to on the bench? And that was just a massive, massive difference in this one. You're bringing on Alexis, you're bringing on Clausen, you're bringing on, I'm trying to think of who even else they went to. I mean, it was just they ran
Yeah.
out of gas, and they really had nobody to go to that was a game breaker, and I think that's where they fell a little bit short.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
I
was
think injuries got the best of the substitutions a little bit, like you mentioned. Like if you look at the guys they didn't sub in, not one is a household name. Nobody really even plays in Serie A that was on the bench except for Aslani a little bit that didn't get off the bench, right? You didn't have Carlos Augusto to spell DeMarco. You had to bring in a center back for him when they subbed him out. Arnautovic wasn't available. So it was a who's who. And you look at two of the guys that missed penalty kicks, it was Sanchez and Clausen, right? And then Lautaro, of course, missed two. Even worse than the two of them. But yeah, that not the most inspiring way. And you mentioned it, I think, too, earlier in our group text before like the match even kicked, or you might have said to me in our text, like there's a chance they're gonna rue the chances they missed in the first leg when they were all over Atletico, and
100%
it came back to
dominated
bite
that
them.
first leg.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think for me, I was watching this game at work, and the new time difference with daylight savings time has kind of messed me up because the second half was during my commute home. So I left, and it was still very much, it was 1-1, but still very much an Inter Milan advancing. And I came home and I like checked the phone real quick, and I saw the 87th minute goal, and I texted you guys right away. I was like, this is over. Like, this is not something where if
You
if you
do
go
not come back from that.
when you come down, yeah, when you lose that lead at Atletico,
Yeah.
it's over. You blew your opportunity. And then to your point, Nick, when you see the names that were coming in, you're bringing in Alexis Sanchez in the 102nd minute, and he's what, 35, 36
35.
now.
Yep.
Like,
Yeah.
Yep. Could be on the podcast.
that is not the guy that you want to see coming in trying to save your season with 15 minutes left. It's just it's really, it's tough. And the other thing that we have to kind of mention it a little bit last week on the pod, I may have jinxed it. I said, it looked like, Serie A is pretty much locked into getting a fifth Champions League slot because they had 8 teams left in Europe, and that was by far the most. I think England had 6 and Germany had 6 or something like that. But now it's like the turntables have really flipped around. So that could have some big impacts to even your team coach, right? Like wherever Roma finishes, they might be missing out on Champions League because Inter blew this. So it's an interesting little dynamic.
I was saying to Nick after Inter blew this, and you have no teams left in the Champions League final 8, and now you almost need 2 of those 3 Italian teams to go really deep in Europa League, and probably need Fiorentina to run the table and make the final again like they did last year in Conference League. And I don't know if that's even enough, depending on what the English and German sides do the rest of the way. Very disappointing. I put a future on them after the first leg. I think they were still plus pretty good money.
I got them at plus 1,800.
Yeah, I might have got them at plus 1,000 or something. Like I thought they were a shoo-in for at least the semifinals after the way they've been playing. And I think for us from Serie A perspective, when you're a fan of the league, like last year felt like the league was finally back when you had Inter and Milan both in the semifinals, Napoli in the quarterfinals, you had Roma in a final, you had Fiorentina in a final. None of them won, but they were all in a final. Like 3 Italian teams in finals was big. Roma won the Conference League the year before. It seemed like the league was starting to compete again in the European, setting. And maybe that does happen in the Europa League with 3 teams left still. But now you have the team that's been dominating the league just get taken out by an Atletico side that, like Nick said, is not their best incarnation of the last decade, right? Maybe their weakest of the last decade from what I can recall. So that I think is the most disappointing part. That's what hurts the most, I think, from a fan of the league perspective.
Yeah, I mean, and let's just look at some of the other results here from this week and see who's through. I mean, man, I know it doesn't. This is out of left field. It doesn't. It's fantasy land, but man, how badly do you wish Liverpool were in the Champions League right now? Because it's literally the list of like the most beatable squads that I've ever seen in terms of the form that everybody's in. I think if you're an English team right now, certainly a City, man, their odds were already short, but it's got to be Cities to lose at this point.
Yeah, it's kind of weird because when you look at the names, though, it's like if you had told me these were the names at the beginning of the season that were going to be in the final 8, wouldn't bat an eye, right? Like Bayern gets through easily, right. PSG got through pretty easily, Man City obviously through pretty easily. Madrid kind of squeaked it out. I think they had did they score the first goal?
No, they scored the second goal. They came back.
They scored so they had to come back. Yeah. So at one point.
Oh no, they scored the first one. Oh wait, I don't even remember. It feels like it was so long ago.
I think they scored the first one. So it doesn't. It's kind of weird because you're right, Nick. Like some of these teams, like Bayern, have been struggling. PSG, with all the turmoil with Mbappe leaving and their form and different managers, not exactly the PSG that we kind of come to expect. And honestly, even Arsenal, like we're talking about Inter going out early. Arsenal were right on the fence there with almost going out early. They obviously came into their home leg with a 1-goal deficit. They managed to turn it around, but then you got to go to penalties and anything can happen. Mm-hmm. And luckily for them, I think Porto had some of the worst PKs that you can put into for a Champions League.
Yeah, them and Inter, they're
Inter's
neck and neck with today's results.
So it is interesting, but to answer your question, Nick, do I really want Liverpool in this right now? Well, with what I would love with the storylines, knowing that Klopp is leaving, I would love Liverpool to get another league title and give Klopp a true, celebration, because when they won it, in 2020, there was obviously COVID, so they didn't have a full celebration there. But the storyline for me is like Arsenal now are going to have to compete again in another, two-leg European fixture. And they might get City, right? There's no more, rules over who you can and can't draw. And I think that would be fascinating because we know that they have to play City on March 30th in the league. Could they have like a 3 matches in 4 games type situation where they both kind of just take each other's, momentum out from underneath them and just beat up on each other, which would be ideal for Liverpool fans.
No, 100%. I think the point I was just trying to make, we mentioned everybody, right? Bayern hasn't looked very good. PSG, you nailed it, hasn't looked very good. Arsenal scraped through over 2 legs. And listen, Porto is a formidable side. So, I mean, we kind of knew how that was going to play out. Arsenal got it done. But you mentioned it. They're in a dogfight for the league. You have Barcelona, who's not the same Barcelona. Dortmund, who's arguably the weakest team left. And Atletico, that, again, credit to them. But I don't think anybody's going to be upset about drawing Atletico in the next round compared to the rest of the team. So you have City and you have Real Madrid, who have to be licking their lips at this point and have to like the way that things are shaking out, provided they don't get each other in this next round.
Yeah, I think, if Inter goes through, they're probably like the 3rd favorite, right up there with Arsenal. And instead now you have Atletico, who, if you look at the futures, are the 7th favorite out of 8 sides left in the competition. So it certainly clears the path a little bit for City and Madrid, you have to feel like. Just to go through the quick futures odds before we move on to close out the round of 8, the quarterfinal. It's City at plus 175, like you guys mentioned, clear favorite. Real Madrid plus 450, Arsenal plus 500, Bayern plus 600. PSG plus 1,200, Barca plus 1,400, Atletico plus 1,800, and Dortmund plus 2,000. Obviously, those will shift depending on who draws who, because that can change the path for some of these teams. If you draw City and you're Arsenal or Madrid, it changes, I think, the future on some of those teams a little bit. But certainly, there's a clear line of who the books are looking at to win this competition, and it certainly looks like it's going to be Man City in their eyes. Again, repeat champions.
For sure.
And I know you guys will be breaking down this deeper, so we're not going to give too much away here. But
now we gotta get on new winners because one of our winners is out.
Plug the Champions League future episode, the quarterfinal preview that you guys will be doing soon. But let's move on to Serie A this week, Scotty. You lead this. Nick and I will do most of the talking, I think. So we'll let you jump in here. But there's 2 big matches in the league.
Yeah, we got an FA Cup week for England, so could be a lot of eyes on Serie A, I think, this weekend. As mentioned, Coach, 2 main matches to kind of keep your eyes on. We'll kick the first one off with Atalanta and Fiorentina, 2 teams that are competing for European competition, and in Atalanta's case, potentially even a Champions League spot. This one right now, Atalanta are the favorite, minus 125, draw plus 260, Fiorentina plus 295. Total in this one looking like it might be an over. Got over 2.5 is minus 130, under 2.5 is plus 100. What do you guys got on this one? Do you think this is a must win for Atalanta if they want to keep their Champions League hopes alive, or do you think Fiorentina have provided enough, competition, I guess, in recent weeks that maybe a draw would be okay for Atalanta in this one?
Yeah, so just before we break it down, I think it's important to give the context of the table, especially after what you mentioned, Italy potentially losing that 5th Champions League spot. There's a clear 1-2-3 with Inter, Milan, and Juve, locking up Champions League spots almost already, barring like a complete meltdown from Milan or Juve at this point. So then it's Bologna on 51 points, Roma on 48, Atalanta on 47, Napoli on 44, Fiorentina 43, and Lazio way down on 40 is probably.
It was nice of you to throw us in there.
Yeah, really nice. It's just like kind of customary that those teams get mentioned. Bologna, the one that's kind of shaking it up and added a 9th side to the conversation for Europe. But without that 5th spot, I do think that this is a very big match, Scotty, in terms of Champions League qualification for Atalanta, because they've kind of faltered a little bit lately after they were the hot side. And they did get a draw last week, which was big for them. They did pick up a point on Bologna, so did Roma. Right now, in my opinion, those are the 3 teams. If we're only getting 4 teams in from Serie A, I think those are the 3 teams that are the truest contenders, unless Napoli somehow get really hot. I don't see Fiorentina in that mix anymore. I really don't, after they couldn't beat Roma at home last week. So I don't know about you, Nick. I like Atalanta at home here at minus 125. I really do. I think they bounce back after getting a point at the Allianz. I think this is a good spot for them to have a little confidence going into it. Now they do play Thursday, but so does Fiorentina. Both teams have matches where they have to win to advance. Almost Fiorentina only won 4-3 against Maccabi Haifa last week. Miracle almost cashed for me last week. I parlayed them
Weren't
and
they up a
Milan.
man?
They were up a man, and they
Yeah.
almost they had to get up a man to win it. Atalanta Sporting is a 1-1, so they're both gonna have tough fixtures on Thursday.
Yeah.
Both at home, but I do
Yeah.
like Atalanta's roster makeup, their form a little bit better. I just don't trust Fiorentina on the road. I think that's why they're plus 295.
Yeah. Yeah. So my first comment was going to be who wants it. I mean, neither of these teams have been in scintillating form over the past month and a half, close to 2 months. Both play in Europe. You mentioned that. I think fortunate for Atalanta that they are at home for that matchup because they're certainly going to have a tougher time than Fiorentina. They did dominate that first leg in Portugal, but only got one goal to show for it. So I think that's still going to be a big priority. But you mentioned that they're just a better side. They have 10 more goals scored than Fiorentina, equal amount of goals given up. And I feel like they've taken care of business at home and they've taken care of business in games like this. I think the
Yeah.
minus 125 is a fair number. I actually kind of like over 2.5 at minus 130. I mean, if you don't necessarily have a dog in this matchup, then you don't need to sweat out a side. 2-1 game. Really, really easy ask for this one, I believe. I thought the number would be a lot higher. So that's kind of where I'm going. I think over 2.5, but if you put a gun to my head, Atalanta's the team.
Yeah,
I'll play.
I do see the minus 130 is a pretty good number here. I didn't even notice that at first. That's a solid number.
Yeah, let me play devil's advocate. In our effort to provide fair and balanced coverage. In their last 6 meetings, Fiorentina are 4-1-1 against Atalanta.
Oh, that's a big
So
stat.
when you're looking at maybe Fiorentina double chance at plus 100, that would have hit 5 of their last 6 times. So even though I agree with what you guys are saying in the context of this season, specifically the last like 2, maybe 3 months, it certainly seems like Atalanta is the play here. Recent history aside, the trend really is favoring Fiorentina and getting some form of result, especially with the value you're getting from the books. So
Interesting.
it is an interesting way to kind of put that into perspective because again, double chance gives you 2 of the 3 possible results, and you're going to get equal money back on any wager you play.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this is a brutal stretch for Atalanta too. Just to throw in before you go, Nick. I mean, this is their most recent run of matches. Starting at the end of February, they had a 1-1 draw at Milan, 4-0 loss at Inter. That was a makeup match from the Supercopa stuff that went on. Then they lost home to Bologna 2-1. Drew Sporting last Thursday 1-1 on the road. Kind of tough luck draw there. They really were the better side for
yep.
most of it. Then they had the 2-2 draw at Juve where they had to come back. I thought my Juve money line last week was cashing when they went up 2-1. Atalanta got the point back. Then they have Sporting again tomorrow. We're recording on Wednesday. This Fiorentina match, and then after that, it's Napoli the following week. And then they have these teams meet a couple times actually coming up. They meet in the Coppa Italia semifinals coming up soon. 2 legs. So they'll be seeing a lot of each other. And Atalanta has been the side that really has had a really, really tough run of fixtures.
So
And
I think you brought up a good point, man. Atalanta, I feel like they gained a point last week, and
yeah,
Fiorentina lost 2.
yes.
That's really more of like where my mindset was in picking a side and looking at the odds and knowing they're at home. And you guys know me. I've kind of been selling Fiorentina all season long, and I'm not going to stop doing that now. But could they get a result? Could they score 2 goals? Sure, they could. But I think, it's going to be a tall task. I'm just going to stick with the over in this one.
Yeah, and just to give some context, the home away, Atalanta one of the better home sides.
Yep.
Fourth best home side, 10 wins, a draw, and 3 losses, 31 scored, 10 conceded. On the road, Fiorentina not very good. Ninth best record on the road. They are 4 wins, 4 draws, 6 losses, only 15 scored in 14 matches, and 17 conceded. So they don't concede as much on the road. With 17 conceded, not terrible, about a goal a match. They're only scoring about a goal a match, which that's what concerns me the most about Fiorentina. They seem to be a much more comfortable side when they're playing at home in terms of just their overall output. Their splits for defense are pretty even, but their scoring goes up by almost 10 goals at home.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Anything else on this one, guys? Or are you ready to move on?
Let's roll.
Good. All right. Our second match that we are going to be breaking down this episode, it's the matchup between the reigning champ of Serie A and the almost definitive new champ of this season. We're talking Inter Milan hosting Napoli. Odds indicate maybe not a closely contested fixture, even though Inter kind of had a disappointing result in the Champions League. But Inter, the hosts, heavy favorites at minus 170, draw plus 300, Napoli plus 390. I think maybe beginning of the season, you circle Inter and Napoli and all their matchups, and when they're happening. But the luster seems to be a little bit off this one. Although I will say Napoli unbeaten in at least their last five. Is there a hope here maybe for a little Napoli upset? Maybe they catch Inter with a little bit of a momentum, defeating loss. Do you see value in a Napoli line here at all, Nick?
I want to. But just this is like recency bias, right? I saw the worst Inter performance of the season. Do they put two of those in a row? I don't know. How much do they rotate? That really is the question for me in this one. This is a game where, and you guys know me, I love to get the value early on in the week. This is not one of those games for me. This is a game where I need to see who's playing. I need to see what's going on, and then we'll lock in our bet. I think if you are a Napoli backer, Napoli +1 at minus 130 is an okay way to look at this game. I mentioned Lautaro and Thuram had a really bad week. Well, I think Osimhen and Guevara had an equally bad week against Barcelona. We didn't really touch on that game all that much because it wasn't much to talk about. It was pretty much one-way traffic from Barcelona. I think Napoli needs a response. I think this coach here is coaching for his next job, whether that's with Napoli or with somebody else. So there's something to be said about that. Osimhen is probably looking for a new team. I think the fans are over him. I think the owner thinks he's gonna cash in 130 million plus. So something to be said about that. I mean, I don't think there's going to be a lack of motivation. I don't think Napoli wants to go in this game and get embarrassed. So I'm kind of looking at them +1. But what response do we get from Inter? That's really the unknown,
That's what I'm looking at. Yep.
I can't really put my finger on it right now. I mean, I don't know. I'm leaning Napoli +1, but I'll let Coach try to talk me out of it.
Yeah, so the way I'm looking at Inter right now, you're out of Champions League. That's out the window, right? Coppa Italia, they already lost. They're out of Coppa Italia. They won the Super Coppa, which is a trophy, and they're going to win the Scudetto. There's no question about that. But I think here, like, if they play most of their lineup heading into the international break coming off this Champions League match, I do think they take care of business at home. I think they're going to be extra motivated and angry after that match today. And I don't think they're going to want to lose to the defending champions in the season where they are going to win the Scudetto, where there's that talk, well, they couldn't beat Napoli, even though they were so dominant. Like, Napoli still got that little bit of business on them. And I don't think this Napoli is very good. I mean, you saw Barcelona took care of business against them on the road the other day. I think with this being at the San Siro, I heavily favor Inter. I can see the +1 possibly pushing. I don't see, for the life of me, unless Inter rotates very heavily, Napoli being able to go and get any kind of result here. I really don't. And that's not me being like a hopeful Roma fan where I'm like, oh, maybe that this is 3 more points that Roma can pull away from Napoli. I just think this is like one of those things.
I'm kind of with you, and we've
Inter responds like they should.
The league is a different beast, and we've seen Inter run through every other team, right? Like, I don't remember there being a contest playing Napoli, Lazio, Roma, Juve, whoever. So I mean, you're right. The odds are there. I just don't know if they maybe go through a slump. I don't know. It's a weird game.
I do think you have to wait for lineups though to make a final, like, definitive call on which way you go if you go anyway in this match from a betting perspective, because they could rotate heavily into, right. They do rest Lautaro or Thuram or somebody in the midfield, and I think that's something that you got to keep an eye on too.
Yeah, I was just going to point out again, similar to last matchup, Inter have a long history of success in this 4-1-1 in their last 6. And even when things are going right for Napoli last season, they split the home and away legs there. So I don't see Napoli really doing much in this one. Again, I've been, on the original bandwagon
Yes.
against Napoli, so I'm not going to jump off now. I do, I am a little concerned with the extra minutes that Inter put on their legs. I get the mindset they might be looking for a bounce back, and that might be motivation, but the physical toll is what I'm really concerned about. And to be honest, like I know Napoli played midweek against Barcelona, but you know, I would can say their legs are probably pretty rested
Yeah.
based off the
And
performance they put in.
Steve made a good point. International break is right after this, right? So it's a week plus off from competitive games for anybody. That's, maybe a little less motivation to rotate.
Yeah. So I guess Inter minus 170, not really great value, but maybe an Inter money line over 1.5.
Yeah, probably got to go
where I
with the over 1.5 if you're gonna touch Inter here. I think.
Yeah.
Let's see. Inter win over 1.5 minus 110.
Yeah.
I don't hate it.
If the lineups are right, that's the way I would lean on this one.
All right.
I agree.
Well, let's slide into our hat trick of picks then for this weekend, last weekend before international break. As mentioned, we also have FA Cup games going on in England, so Premier League a little bit of a slim roster to pick from. So I guess I'll kick things off. My first lock of the week, I'm going with Luton Town draw no bet versus Nottingham Forest. Luton just had as bad of a loss as you can have outside of, maybe the Inter collapse. I mean, this collapse was probably worse, just not as high stakes. Up 3-0 at halftime against Bournemouth, and then conceding 4 goals in the second half to lose it, albeit on the road, is a tough one, especially when you're facing relegation. Those are 3 very valuable points that I'm sure they're going to wish they had back. But I think they can get a bounce back result here. They're at home. Forest have been really, really bad, especially recently. I think they have just 1 win in their last 11 matches. So taking the draw no bet here is a pretty safe play. I also like the fact that even though Luton Town haven't been getting a lot of results, their play has been okay. They've scored in 19 of their last 20 games, so they're able to get goals on the score sheet. So I think at home here, they're likely to get at least 1, if not 2, and that should cover them against a pretty mediocre Forest team who also hasn't scored in at least their last 3 matches. So,
man,
plus 100 draw no bet seems like a no-brainer.
I didn't realize they gave up all those goals in the second half. That's rough, but following your logic, I'm glad you wrote it down. I was going to say that 2 things I like about Luton this year is, number 1, they're pretty fun to watch at home, but number 2, they're scoring. And you put the stats down. I don't need to repeat it, but just even from recent memory, from the eye test, from watching them, like they generate offense, and that's something I don't think I expected out of them quite so much. So definitely like this bet.
Yeah, it's a fun one to root for and watch at the very least.
All right, I'm going to the Bundesliga with my first one. It is the club that has become my old reliable this season. Last year was Union Berlin for me. This year it's been Stuttgart. I like them money line this weekend at Hoffenheim at minus 115. They've been flying of late. We know that to open 2024, they had those back-to-back losses, which kind of hurt them in the standings, but they're hanging around. They're in 3rd place. And since then, since the end of January, 5-2 win over Leipzig, 3-1 win at Freiburg, 3-1 win over Mainz, 2-1 win over Darmstadt down to Man. Drew Cologne 1-1, which was the only blemish recently. Then they scored 3 on Wolfsburg, 1-3-2 on the road, 2-0 win against Union at home last week. So they've been scoring a lot of goals, and they've been getting results, which is why I like them at Hoffenheim. So 6 wins in their last 7 in the league, and that's 7 unbeaten. Hoffenheim in that same span has they've conceded in 22 straight matches, which bodes well for a Stuttgart side that's scoring. They lost the reverse fixture at home 3-2. I don't think they'll make the same mistake here against Hoffenheim. And in order to qualify for next season's Champions League, they're going to need to stave off of one of either RB Leipzig or Dortmund. So wins in matches like this are imperative for Stuttgart if they're going to hang on to a top 4 spot. I like them at this number.
I think their only loss for us this year was when they were the Podlock that 1 week.
I think so.
They were.
I'm pretty sure Coach Steve has rode them to success outside of that one.
They've been really good. They've been one of my most reliable sides this year.
I think when we get the inevitable Stuttgart Union Berlin matchup, we're gonna have to make that a featured match on the pod.
Well, that was last week. They beat them 2-0.
Oh,
they beat Union. Yeah.
Did we have it?
Damn.
No, I think I wanted to take Stuttgart, but the odds were too crappy because Union's so
Okay.
bad this year. Yeah.
Terrible.
Makes sense. All right, I will go with an old reliable on my side, and that is AC Milan. Chances FC, as Scotty calls them. We're going to go back to team total over 1.5, minus 115 at Hellas Verona. I like this for two reasons. Reason one, we fade Hellas whenever the number permits. They are just on the outside of the relegation zone, but by no means safe. They are only safe currently by 1 point from 18th, 2 points from 19th. So, very real possibility they get back in that bottom drop zone. And number two, Milan has not scored 2 goals in the league in 3 straight matches. That means they're due. I think their offense has been clicking. They're generating way more chances than they've been putting in. They did put up 4 in the Europa League or Conference League, whatever the one that they're in last week. They have a game again, but I think the team starting to gel a little bit. They're getting results. They're up to second place in the table. So 2 goals doesn't seem like a lot to ask against Hellas.
All right. I'll go to my second lock of the weekend. I'm going to ride a very reliable pick. I'm going to take Tottenham money line at Fulham. It's still plus money, plus 105. I said it last week. I'll say it again. I think the Tottenham that we saw to start the season that was rattling off 2+ goals in like 15, 18, something like that consecutive matches. I think they're back. I think books are going to slowly adjust to that now that they're fully healthy. And I think this line is indicative of that. They're in the process, but they're not quite there. Still getting plus money against a team like Fulham, I think is really good value. They were still a little almost timid against Aston Villa last weekend, but after a 0-0 first half, they managed to put 4 goals in the second half and have a pretty comfortable win when everything was all said and done. And looking at their fixture list, for the rest of the month, they got Luton Town after international break. Then they have West Ham, Nottingham Forest, and Newcastle. So not a whole lot of difficult fixtures there. You think maybe at Newcastle might be the trickiest of the bunch. So I think they're going to go on a run here. I think this is probably the last time we'll get decent value on Spurs. So I'm going to take it now at plus 105 and appreciate it because I think it's as lock of a lock you're going to get in England this weekend.
All right, like it. I'm going with this one. I assist to Nick on this one. He pointed this one out, and I was like, "Oh, I like this one," because I was looking at a different angle in this match. And it's Genoa at Juve. Both teams have scored plus 125. Juve has incredibly gone 7 straight without posting a clean sheet. I was shocked when I saw that it was 7 in a row. And in that span, Genoa has scored in 6 of those 7. The reverse fixture is a 1-1 draw at the Marassi, and Genoa hasn't backed down from bigger sides this year. They've gotten some results against bigger sides. And both teams' scores hit in 7 of 8 head-to-heads. I know Genoa was down in Serie B last season, but going back this season and 3.5 seasons after that, prior to last season, they've hit in 7 out of 8. I think Genoa has enough going forward in attack to get one on the road between Retegui and what's the Gudmundsson, yes.
Nasty.
Between the two of them, they've put up some really good performances in attack this season. I think they get it done, and at plus 125, I think it's worth the chance to take.
What's his name is there too, right? Malinovsky from
Yes,
Atalanta.
Malinovsky is there now too. Yeah,
playing really well. All right, I like it. I have to do it, guys. We made it 35 minutes almost into the pod. We have not talked about Sadi out.
You need a new hashtag now.
Yeah,
I don't even know what I'm going to talk about on Twitter anymore because I've been talking about this for a year and a half now.
And they did it to you. You gave it up for Lent, and then it happened during Lent. So you can even
I put out a tweet. I said, "Hey, anybody that's not religious, I don't explain this." Well, right.
The bad news for you, Nick, is that means Sadi might be coming back come Easter Sunday.
It's possible.
He might just be resurrected.
Can't rule it out. They did keep his staff on, which I thought was kind of weird. I mean, I guess who you're going to appoint at this point in the season?
Maybe because he resigned and they didn't can him.
Yeah. Lazio's really got nothing else going for them. They're still in the Copa, but Juve probably takes care of them the next round. But got to get this result. They are taking on Frosinone, plus 115 on the money line, and Frosinone are in absolute fucking shambles. They have not won a game in their last 7. Their last win was against Cagliari. They lost last week to Sassuolo, who was below them in the standings, who we all know is one of the worst teams on the planet. So now's the right time. It's it's not going to have the same effect as Mourinho leaving, but I think good game for Lazio to have a different coach in charge. Have to get this one done. Plus 115. We celebrate.
That new
All
manager
right, we'll
bounce
see if
never
the
fails.
new manager bounce comes for Lazio like it did for Roma.
Have to.
All right, I will close out the locks of the week for me this weekend. I'm actually going back to the Tottenham game that we had last weekend and going with the other side, which is Aston Villa. The pick'em line for this at West Ham is actually minus 125. That's the best value I could find. But really, don't let that loss against Tottenham fool you. Aston Villa are still very much a strong team. West Ham on the other side, I'm not super convinced of. They have done better in February, but last weekend they had a 2-0 deficit at halftime against Burnley, and they needed a 91st minute equalizer from Danny Ings to kind of get any form of result against a relegation side at home. So I think Villa get the job done here. I mean, both teams have European fixtures midweek at home, so I don't think there's really any advantage there. And when they met earlier this season, Villa hammered them 4-1. So I like Villa getting a win here, just in case there's a little bit of home cooking. I will take the pick'em line at minus 125, but if you want to take a money line, by all means, I think Villa get a pretty easy win.
All right, yeah, and West Ham's another side that both those sides play Thursday also, right? So that's another.
But
one
both
of those
have the
teams. Yeah,
Europa
they both
Conference. Got it. Yep, and they're both home too, so it's not like they're traveling anywhere.
Yeah,
they're both staying in London. So,
all right. I didn't think I was gonna be able to do it this week, but I found an angle, and I like this angle, and I'm not just trying to force it here, but I like Roma in 2.5 over 2.5 versus Sassuolo at minus 110. Every one of Roma's league matches under Daniele De Rossi has gone over 3 goals, or 3 goals or over, I should say. And they've won 6 out of 8 of those matches. And 5 of the last 6 head-to-heads between these two has also gone over 2.5. Roma's been great at home, and I expect that trend to continue in a match where Roma can likely get 3 themselves against relegation battling Sassuolo. I'm not worried about playing on Thursday since they have a good advantage against Brighton. Turnover in the lineup, I think Roma's just that much better than Sassuolo. It could be a 2-1, it could be a 3-0, could be something other combination, but I do think you get 3 goals or more in this one, and a Roma win, of course.
They've been good to us. Can't hate too much on it. I'm sorry. One last thing I did want to say about Lazio: they have had a red card in like 5 of their last 8 matches. Not them personally, but there have been red cards in 5 of their last 8 matches. Just if your book offers red cards, like, and it's anywhere around like plus 300, just something to consider.
They've turned to violence under Sarri.
I
Like
guess
Mourinho
so.
infiltrated the locker room or something at the end there.
Well, I think 3 of those games at least, the other team had a red, and we didn't do much with it.
They had 3 themselves in that one match, right?
Very true.
Yeah.
So just something to consider to maybe keep an eye on, see how the game is going. But my last pick, I am going with my other team, Bologna, money line. They're away to Empoli. Empoli is another team like Hellas. They are right on the edge of that relegation zone. They're right there in 16th place. So Bologna will be looking to bounce back. They were on an incredible run of form. Could not get it done against Inter last week, but Empoli is a perfect spot to get back in the win column. Plus 110 just seemed way too good to pass up. We'll ride with Mota's boys.
Yeah, right. I like it. I did this one. I thought it was a good bounce back spot too when I saw the number.
All right, Nick. We got a podlock again in the MLS this week, so I'm going to let you take it away because you've been crushing MLS.
Yeah, we were going to go MLS. We switched it up, so a little confusion here on the pod. But right. We are 1-0 in MLS. If anybody's keeping track of our MLS record, we are hitting at 100%.
Let's give the other MLS pick first, then, since it's not the official podlock.
Okay. The other MLS pick we have was Portland Timbers double chance minus 110. I already forgot who they're playing. At Houston. Portland's in first place. They've scored 8 goals. They're looking really good. Houston hasn't won yet. They've only played 2 games in the league, but they've played in that other CONCACAF Nations League, CONCACAF Champions Cup. I don't know. They've been involved in other competitions. So I think they haven't really had the chance to gel yet. So Portland Timbers. I like it. If it wins, we're taking credit for it on the pod. If it doesn't, it wasn't our pod lock, because our pod lock is Barcelona plus quarter of a goal at Atletico Madrid minus 130. We like the form Barcelona is in. They have crept up to third. They haven't lost in over a month, close to 2, and advanced in the Champions League. And Atletico, despite the beautiful performance they put in today against Inter, they did expend 120 minutes worth of energy, penalty kicks. They lost to Cadiz last weekend. We 2-0. I mean, they're just really not generating the offense that we thought. Barcelona has to be favored in this one. Just pure game of form. Can't see Atletico getting it done here. So plus a quarter of a goal. Hopefully they win outright. If not, we will take a draw and a little bit of a cash.
Yeah, like it.
All right. Well, that'll do it for this week's episode of Kicks and Picks podcast. If you are listening to us on your favorite podcast platform of choice, make sure you go and check us out on our YouTube, youtube.com/@kicksandpicks podcast. If you're watching us on YouTube and you want to get us on your favorite podcast platform of choice, be sure to hit subscribe. We're on Apple, Google, Spotify, you name it. And if you like enjoy the content more than just your weekly listen, we also have a Patreon where we put up all of our written picks, and we'll throw in some written pieces here and there. So feel free to go over to our Patreon, Kicks and Picks podcast, for $5 a month. I think that about does it for this week's pod. So we'll be back next week at some point with probably a Champions League episode, and then maybe we'll do a little MLS coverage during the international break. I think it might be a good time for us to kind of dive into that. So thanks for listening, and we'll catch you guys next week.